Leaders, real life leaders.
Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. And we have got an exciting guest, Robert Jordan. He is the author of the book, Right Leader, Right Time, Discover Your Leadership Style for Winning in Career and Your Company. So we're super excited. He owns a very interesting company. I've yet to hear of some, I've heard of similar business, but not quite as interesting as this. It's called InterimExecs, and they help people find top executives and experts at growing companies, and they help fix companies, and they hire C-level employees, but just for an interim time. So that's why it's called InterimExecs.com. So welcome. We're so glad to have you, Robert.
Thanks so much, Chantel. It's a pleasure to be with you.
So I want you to describe the 4 styles and of the right leader. And I think this is really important because I really agree with that every leader has different gifts and different things that they're really good at. And you don't want everyone in your top leadership team to have those same exact characteristics. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So describe the 4 styles. And maybe even describe, what do you see, like, are more leaders this or more leaders that? Talk about that for a second.
Sure. So the 4 leadership styles we identified and wrote about in the book are fixer, artist, builder, and strategist. And in the book, it's referred to in short FABS, FABS leadership styles. I should also say we're launching a free leadership assessment called FABS Leadership Assessment. If any of your listeners want to take the assessment themselves and get some insights into their own style. So, little bit of description. Fixer, as the name implies, is the kind of energy where these folks love turnaround situations. This is the leader who loves to run into a burning building time after time. The difference between fixer wiring, if it's dominant, and this ability all good leaders have to be able to resolve problems, is that the fixer is wired to do this time after time. Artist leader, this is the person that views the world as a blank canvas or a piece of clay. So a standout example in the world right now is Elon Musk. Not referring to Twitter. As you and I are recording this, there's a lot of controversy over that. But if you look at Elon's work in terms of Tesla and SpaceX and the Boring Company, this is one of the greatest innovators of the modern age, we believe.
Well, I want to say this because you gave an example of the artist. But for me, when you started talking about fixer, the person that I thought of is on The Prophet, which, by the way, is my son. He's 11 years old. And it's so funny. He loves the show, The Prophet, and I'm trying to lead him being into an entrepreneur. And he loves Marcus Lemonis. But if I had to say anyone who is a fixer, it would be him. And my friends tell me all the time, they're like, oh my gosh, you totally remind me of Marcus Lemonis. So if I had to say, right, without even hearing the rest of them, I can tell you right now, I am the fixer. There's no way that I'm not any of the others. Maybe I'm a little bit, but I definitely, they always say you're a girl version of Marcus Lemonis. So I definitely would already put myself into the fixer category, but you keep going.
Sorry, I was looking off to the side there for a second because we had a book launch party, and I'm going to send you a mug. I'm going to send you a mug afterward. It's going to say the fixer. It's going to say fixer.
Oh, good.
He is a perfect example of that kind of energy that can kind of go into the burning fire time after time. Exactly. The third style is builder. Now, I know everybody in business loves to be the builder and think of themselves as a builder. We get that. Builder for us is a definition where the energy is the kind of leader that can take a small team, product, service, grow it to scale, grow it to market domination. What tends to happen with builder leaders is that once they've done that, you'll see them leave to go on to the next small team project client to grow it again. It's a repeat kind of wiring that's similar in a way to fixer. The final fourth style is strategist. Strategist is the leader at scale. Strategist is the leader of a complex or very large organization where it's gone beyond a person's personal span of control. You know that phrase from Stephen Covey? Most leadership styles where they're a fixer, artist, or builder tend to be team sizes of 10, 20, 50, 100, but personal relationships matter. Strategist is the style at which you cannot rely on personal relationships. It's too large, it's too complex, and there are different things you need to do to excel in that role.
So good. So talk about, I think one crucial aspect of leadership is really staying true to yourself and kind of feeling what's most natural to you as a leader and not trying to be all of those, right? So what would you say is there any one of those leadership styles where you go, if I had to kind of divide up, the DISC personality score, you know how they say like less than 10% of the people are a high D on the DISC personality scale. Is that true for what you're saying? Would you say like, only a small percentage of people are this, a lot of people are this? What have you seen anything like that?
It's a great question. I think that, for example, in our line of work, where we're doing these project-based leadership rules, they have to have quick impact. A lot of this applies where organizations may be in trouble, and so it attracts leaders who tend to be this dominant fixer mindset. But it's not true across the board. One thing we say in the book is we're not trying to pigeonhole any leader to say you just have to be this one thing. All great leaders are a combination of energies between fixer, artist, builder, and strategist. What we have observed, though, is that with exceptional leaders, there tends to be one dominant style or a dominant plus a secondary style that tends to come out over the time of that person's career. And, I think you used a really important phrase, Chantel, earlier. You said, not trying to be all things to all people. You've identified what we find to be the number one trait of leaders who are not excelling, which is for the majority of leaders who are experiencing careers that are not necessarily, oh my gosh, extraordinary. If you wanted to point to the number one reason, it is trying to be too much. It is trying to be all things to all people.
Mm.
There's not enough focus.
Yeah. And so for me, I am definitely the fixer. I do a great job of that. But if I don't have enough builders around me, and enough strategists and enough artists, I can get myself in trouble. And so I would say if I had to put myself in order, I would say, how the DISC personality, I would say, okay, first I'm a fixer, then probably an artist, then a builder, and then a strategist. So if I want to grow the company the way I want to grow, I've got to hire somebody in my C-level suite that can help build and can help grow the company to where I want. And then I also need that strategist, because that if I hire the builder and he just kind of runs rogue and doesn't have any strategies in place. So give us some really practical examples of this, like any stories you can tell with someone just being one part of a leader and then they're missing. What are they missing on the other end?
Well, we interviewed a lot of leaders for the book. And for example, what we would hear from a number of strategist leaders, these are leaders that tended to be large-scale organizations, is that a number of those folks would report back that they had to have some kind of artist energy, some kind of artist leader around them. Because generally, folks coming into strategist role, it's not front and center that they're going to play in artist mode mostly. Artist mode tends to be the renegade, the outsider, the person who is not the most agreeable person on your team, but they just keep on coming up with these off-the-wall ideas that in many cases will advance the business more than just steady state. So that's one combination that we see. One of the leaders we interviewed, he said something interesting when we described the 4 Fab styles. He said, I'm an investor in a company. He said, it's interesting as you described this, that while the company was in trouble, he said, we had the greatest CEO. But then once all the problems were fixed, he wasn't so great anymore. And he was pointing to the need that we all have, I think, as stakeholders, or if you're an investor in a company, or you just care about the team that you're on, to be thinking about how everyone is best placed in their role. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. And I think I really like what you just said is that I think a key part is that at different times in the organization where we all know this, like when you're this big, this leader's the right fit. But as you get to this level and this level and this level, they're not the right fit. But I think if you can pick the right person of where you're needing that help right at that time, and it goes back to the, having good people in the wrong seats. They might be great, but they're not great for your organization of where you are and what you're needing right now.
Yes.
Which is really important.
This is the way, this is the corporate model that we all now live with, right? Because we're all used to being in organizations where outside resources are on call. It doesn't matter how large or small your company is. You have resources that are not necessarily full-time employees, right? And so a lot of this thinking can really advance a company, but it's not our parents or our grandparents' model of people being rigidly fixed in roles, or people who are necessarily going to be at one company their entire life. One of the models we point to in the book is Hollywood, because what we're all used to is a work model there where the actors, the actresses, they go on set, make a great movie or make a great Netflix series. And when it is over, they move on. And there are hundreds of people involved in the organization of, say, making a movie or a series. They're all professionals. They're advancing their careers. But when that movie or series is done, they essentially disband. It doesn't mean they've ended their careers. It means they're moving on to another project. And much of work for a lot of people has become in this way, more project-based.
And now a word from our sponsor, Chantel Realty. Run your business your way, only at Chantel Realty. You can have all the freedom with none of the standard real estate red tape. If you're an agent, you get to run the show however you want and be your own boss. If you want to launch a team, you don't have to jump through all the hurdles and holdups. From day one, you'll have tons of tools and perks to offer your team. Powerful real estate tech like KV Core, Brokerment, and SkySlope. If you want to be your own brokerage or already have your own brokerage, that's not a problem either. You'll still get to run it however you want. All Chantel requires is a small Powered by Chantel logo next to yours. You can be the broker, you can be the manager, and you get to determine splits. You get all the tech, admin support, ownership stock, and revenue share, but most importantly, all the freedom, all the time, only at Chantel Realty.
So one thing I want to highlight is you talk about in the book that chaos demands a fixer, stagnation requires an artist, growth needs a builder, and scale calls for a strategist. And I love that, but I want you to break each one of those down. As in, we say this is real life leadership, and I really believe that people learn from stories. So just giving us a little kind of maybe glimpse of someone for each one of those. Explain that in a story way of things you've seen.
Sure. So I'll give some of these are more historical. The dust just settled and everyone could say, "Oh, I get it." There was a famous business leader named Lee Iacocca. He was famous because of Ford and Mustang. He didn't get the top job. Chrysler was on the brink of failure. He went there and on day one, replaced most of the management team. He demanded the US government give him a huge loan. Within a year or two, he had paid it off, but he completely turned around Chrysler from a broken organization, to something that was once again vibrant, right? Artist. Artist, we're not going to keep on picking on Elon, Steve Jobs. Everyone is familiar with Steve Jobs. And I mean, talk about viewing the world as your canvas, right? We're all walking around with an iPhone. It's not an iPhone, it's Android, but the entire kind of operating mindset we have in the world is that we have a phone, that has apps on it. And, that extends to the iPad, and truly viewing the world as his canvas. Builder tends to be, again, everyone loves the title. Builder tends to be something that in most cases for most businesses is not necessarily going to be on the world stage. Could be. But I'll give you an example. I know you're East Coast, Chantel, and I've spent a bunch of time in Boston. Boston has this wonderful chain of bakeries, and they're outstanding. And I doubt that this chain is called Tate is ever going to go anywhere else other than Boston. But in Boston, it's dominant. Downtown locations and the suburbs, absolutely great. At the heart of that bakery is a builder, is somebody who said, I'm going to dominate the Boston market. Okay. Strategist. One of the preeminent strategists of the modern era has been Fred Smith. He was the founder of FedEx. He's one of the only leaders that we can point to who kind of went around the bases in terms of he founded FedEx. That was a very creative kind of artist energy. He had to take it through crisis. There are famous stories of him going to Las Vegas. He was betting and winning because he couldn't meet payroll. Fixer energy. Building, of course. But he arrived at, in the book, we have this phrase, highest and best use. And his highest and best use was in strategist mode. And so for many years, he oversaw an organization with hundreds of thousands of employees in over 100 countries, just a vast and complex business. Mm-hmm. Does that give you a picture before?
Yes, it does. I'd like to have you talk about what if, let's say someone is a fixer and the organization is now fixed, and they kind of fix it. What would you say to that leader? Would you say like, okay, maybe it's time for you to move on and fix another organization? Because if you said to me, it's so funny. I just can't even believe that we're talking about this. Because someone said to me, what would be your dream job? And I said, it would be what Marcus Lemonis does. Like, I would just thrive in that because I can literally go into an organization and be like, oh my gosh, we need to fix this. We need to fix this. We need to fix that. So would you suggest that? Would you say, look, your time there might be up. Now you need to hire a builder to help it grow?
You're 100% on the money. In a way, what sparked, we spent about 5 years writing Right Leader, Right Time. And what sparked it is we had written a previous book 10 years ago called How They Did It. And it was a series of interviews with phenomenal company founders. It was all around entrepreneurship. And one of the founders we interviewed, he said, out of the blue, he said, if I hire a fixer in one of my companies and that company isn't broken, he'll break it just so he can fix it. Mm-hmm. And then that line stuck with me for a long time. And when we were doing all of the research for this book, we purposefully asked that question of every fixer we interviewed. We said, we heard this quote. What do you think of it? And I thought they'd all be upset. I thought, be kind of like, how dare you? That's not the way fixers responded. Fixers responded and said, yeah, so what? Like, I'm supposed to break things if they're not, which I thought, okay, now that's a different leadership energy than you will hear, for example, from a strategist. Strategist at large organization doesn't say, yeah, I think I'll go break this because it's broken. The short answer for you, Chantel, is the fixer whose work is done, they absolutely need to move on. Now, a large company, that doesn't mean they're necessarily leaving the company. We know plenty of fixers in large companies where they go to one country, for example, where operations are broken, fix it, move to another country, or move to a new client.
Well, just explain. The only one that I understand fixer, I understand builder, I understand strategist. The part where you say stagnation requires an artist. Give me an example of that, like of someone who was an artist that came into the organization and changed it.
It's a great question. And one of the artist leaders we interviewed, he was a lieutenant for Andy Grove at Intel. Andy Grove is really thought of, I think, as the most amazing CEO Intel had, caused massive growth. And one of the things Andy Grove said about this particular lieutenant, he said, he's my wild duck. He said, every team needs a wild duck. And what he meant was, just picture Intel, all these engineers, all of this attention to detail. How many circuits can we cram onto a chip? How many billions of flips per second and all of that. And he said he needed some kind of renegade outsider, somebody with a completely contrary kind of energy to advance the team, because it would tend to be that all these engineers are just thinking the same way. So he called this particular lieutenant named Avram. He said he was his wild duck. That guy was actually the founder of Intel Capital. So one of the first venture capital funds inside a major corporation, and it needed a kind of other energy, which was not just the me too, I'm an engineer in a department.
So good. Well, this has been great. We're out of time. Tell listeners where they can find you and where they can follow you.
Thanks so much. I can be reached at InterimExecs.com.
Love it. Well, you guys stay tuned. We've got another episode coming up in just a few. Bye-bye for now.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real Life Leadership. If you'd like to get the show notes or access more resources, log on to reallifeleaders.com/podcast to get the show notes from this episode and any other resources we might have mentioned. And also, we'd love to hear from you. Be sure to review or rate this podcast on Apple Podcasts to help spread the word. And if you have any leadership questions you want answered, email podcast@reallifeleaders.com.